Welcome to the Vision Driven Basketball Training Podcast. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, whether you're watching on YouTube, and for any of you guys who are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else you listen to podcasts on. Appreciate you guys for being there and tuning in, giving me your time. If you guys are on YouTube right now, make sure you guys drop a like and you guys subscribe if you are new. Podcasts come out every Sunday. And of course, follow me on Instagram as well. My Instagram is at Vision Driven Basketball. And, I haven't said it for a while, but, you guys know, anybody who's been watching for, any amount of time, a lot of the questions that I answer, a lot of the topics I cover are just questions that I've gotten through my DMs or comments or whatever. But typically DMs are the best way because usually I'll see all of those. Sometimes I miss a comment on YouTube or whatever. So it's a lot easier if you just do that. But again, like I always say, for a lot, sometimes we'll all get questions where like I've basically already covered it, and you probably will just get more by just watching what I've already done. So make sure you guys go look through, see what I have. I got a lot of podcasts out. I don't even know what number this is. It's probably like 45 or 46. Like we're getting kind of close to a year. It's getting pretty close to that. So that's pretty cool. And if you guys are listening to Apple Podcasts, would appreciate you guys would scroll down, leave a review. And like I said in last week's episode, every week then I'm going to look, and if I have new reviews, then I'll read them. And I just look right now because as soon as I started talking, I was like, oh yeah, I said I was going to do that. So I may as well check right now. And I do have a new review this week. Comes from King of Landons. It says, great IQ. I love how the show teaches the mental state of basketball when a lot of people don't. Everything from creativity to routine plays, you have it all. 5 stars. Appreciate the review. It just helps the show to grow, helps more people to see it. And of course, that just means that we can do it bigger and better. So appreciate you guys who have left reviews for me. And like I said, if you could do that real quick, just go down, let me know what you think, and I'll rate it on the show. So this week, I want to talk about bad coaches, dealing with bad coaches, what you can do as a player. I kind of I'm going to kind of take this a couple different ways because there's kind of a few different elements that I want to talk about. But, the first thing, and kind of what got me started, I actually got a question about this, but I was at an AAU tournament like 3 weeks ago, and it was for kids who were in like 5th through 8th grade. It was a pretty high-level tournament, I'd say. Like the teams there were pretty good. They came from all over. I live in Pennsylvania. The teams there, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, some Rhode Island teams, and so they were coming from a good amount of places, good basketball areas in general, and they were good teams there, and it just kind of got me thinking about it because I'm standing there, and I was there the whole day. I was working it, and I was watching just the dynamic of certain coaches, and it's kind of how I approach things now because I haven't been coaching for all that long. So, a lot of you guys know, aside from just this my training stuff I do, is, with my online stuff, my YouTube, and then my in-person training that I do. I also coach a high school team. So I've been doing that for a couple years. Before that, I coached a middle school team. So I've been kind of coaching for, I guess this would be 3 years. And then I also been coaching with an AAU team for all 3 of those years as well. So I've been progressing along forward. And obviously, that's 3 years isn't all that long, but it's enough to kind of see some stuff that works, some stuff that doesn't, and more so, it's long enough where you can kind of see, you can start to see patterns of what coaches are good and what coaches aren't. And at this point, I can tell when I look at a coach, I see how they interact with their players, with their team. I can tell who's a good coach and who's a bad coach. And this doesn't necessarily always have to do with winning, right? Which we'll get into, but it's easier for me to be able to tell a lot of the times now. And so this is where I was at the tournament. I'm watching some of these teams, and it's just so funny to me when it comes to AAU because there are no credentials for AAU coaches. I'm just going to be honest with you. There are a lot of horrible AAU coaches out there. In terms of, like, not even necessarily basketball-wise, like, some of them, but, like, a lot of them that I saw, they probably knew basketball decently well, but they don't know how to coach. They don't know how to like interact with players that age. They don't know how to like actually get the most out of players. And ultimately, for a lot of those coaches that I saw, it was completely about them. It was completely about winning, completely about like, and at that age, your 5th through 8th grade, winning really is not important. It's just not that important. Okay. At that age, it should be about developing, and really at any age, it should always be about developing your players. But that was what got me thinking on this, because I'm looking, and I would say at that tournament, 90% of the coaches that I saw there just weren't good coaches. Like, they just flat out weren't. And it's to a point, where if you coach at any sort of school, you coach at the middle school level, at the high school level with like an actual school, typically there's going to be, not always, I wouldn't say qualifications, but like you're going to have more checks and balances, right? Like, you're going to have an athletic director who you have to report to. You're going to have parents who are more involved. You're going to have teachers who are more involved. You're going to have assistants and helpers who are like, there's just a lot more that's involved with it. So typically, a lot of times you're going to have coaches who are bad, who get weeded out a little bit more often. Okay. Not always, definitely not always, but certainly more so than AAU. With AAU, anybody, any Joe Schmo can just create a team and start coaching. And trust me, I've experienced that before. I've seen it over and over and over again. So there really is an epidemic of bad coaches throughout basketball. And that's kind of how it is with, how popular basketball is. It's honestly, in my opinion, probably the most popular youth sport. In fact, I don't even know if that's really an opinion. To me, it just seems like that's probably what it is. And so with how much AAU continues to grow, you got new teams popping up, new coaches, like everything is just growing so much that obviously you're going to have some bad apples mixed in with the good. But at that tournament, it was kind of discouraging for me to see like how many of the bad apples are out there. Like, there's a lot of them. And this is not to be on like a whole downer note, but like this is kind of where I wanted to go, because this is where this whole thing stemmed from. But I want to again relate it back to like a player's perspective, because obviously a lot of you guys are players listening and you want to know like, hey, how do I deal with this coach or that coach? Like, certainly I want to talk about that too, because I have experience with that, and I know that's something that a lot of you guys can definitely benefit from. But I know I probably have a lot of coaches. I think I have a good mix of coaches and players who watch, and trainers as well. I'll kind of mix them in with that group. But even more so like coaches who are, no, I would say coaches and trainers. I think they can both kind of benefit from it. But, something that I think it's important to be able to check yourself on being a coach or a trainer is like, so much of it is always about like, you have to step back and you have to look at what actually matters with coaching, right? Like, what's the point of coaching? And the issue with youth sports is that a lot of times coaches try and make it completely about winning, to the point where like I'm at that tournament and I'm hearing coaches who are coaching, 10, 11-year-olds, like, just, screaming, swearing at their kids on the bench, like, and I mean, just ridiculous. Like, coaches calling timeouts just to like cuss out their entire team of 10-year-olds, and then not actually give them any help with like what's happening on the court, just because they're angry and they can't control their emotions. So that to me is just like, I mean, if I'm a parent and the coach treats my kid like that, like I'm probably fighting that coach. Gonna be honest with you. Like, I'm probably gonna come off of the sideline. I'm probably gonna go fight that coach. But aside from that, like, my kid's not playing on that team anymore. That's the bottom line, right? Like, my team's not, like, my kid's not gonna play for my kid's not gonna play for a coach like that. And that happens when winning and you as a coach feeling good about yourself and you putting way too much into like the result. That's what's gonna happen. Is you're gonna have coaches who are way too overly emotional, can't control themselves. They don't understand that like you're trying to develop people, you're trying to develop basketball players, and then you can think about winning. That's really where the priority has to lie. So the and something that I talk about, and really anytime that people ask me about, anytime I'm on a podcast, like something comes up where it's like, what do you do when it comes to like, like how can you get the most out of your workouts for players? Like, how do you help players the most? And for me, it's like, it always comes down to how, like, are you player focused? Like, do you put your players' development above everything else? And that's the lens that you look at things through. And again, like my experience watching is that a lot of coaches, especially with AAU, are not like that. They just aren't. They do not put that the player first. And that's something that I think needs to change. And again, like I said, we'll see, because it's discouraging to me when I see that so many coaches they don't understand that, and it becomes about what's like they don't understand how to appeal to players. That's the other thing too, is like, it is the best way to get a player to understand something, to change something, is the best way to like berate them and scream at them and like just straight up tear them down. I don't think it is. And a lot of coaches, like, that's just how they're brought up, and they think that's the best way. In my opinion, that's just not the best way to do it. And even if you look at coaches, like, throughout my playing career, I played with a lot of different coaches who had different personalities, different styles, and some of them were real loud, like, they're like, they like to really get into it. And a lot of coaches are kind of a little more reserved, a little quieter, but the overall, it really doesn't change how you play. I played on some good teams that were coached by coaches who were a little bit more laid back. They weren't like, raise their voice kind of guys, and those teams were still good. Sometimes better than teams that had coaches who were, crazy and loud and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's one thing. I think that as a whole, coaches need to be better. And again, obviously, like I said, guys, it's this. I want to relate this back to players, but ultimately, I think with coaches, it has to be like, coaches have to stop making it about themselves, because I think a lot of them do, and that's ultimately why it's so toxic. A lot of these teams, and especially because coaches think that, like, you're working with players who are good. Like, a lot of those, the tournament I was at was a really good tournament. Like, it was a lot of really talented kids. And again, to me, it's unfortunate that those are the coaches that are working with the best players. Like, to me, I think that you get a lot more out of those players, because I look at it as like that 10, 11-year-old, a lot of those kids are going to probably hate basketball by the time they get to high school. Like, they're just going to be burnt out of it, because there's so much pressure put on that kid to win and to not be able to make mistakes, to not be able to grow at all, that, like, by the time you're 14, 15, 16 years old, like, at some point you just got to get tired of that. So again, the number one concern has to be development overall. That's going to be the number one thing, right? Developing that person, right? Ultimately, like, off the floor, how do you develop them as, being good sports, right? The way that they communicate with their teammates, with their coaches, with the officials, right? Do you set a good example? Because a lot of coaches just don't set good examples. Like, when your player sees you, berating a ref, or, you are berating one of your players, like, how is your player then going to respond in that same situation? They're not going to respond positively. They're not going to respond to their teammates positively so that they can keep going forward. It's going to be a continuous cycle of negativity, and that's not the best way to do things. Certainly not for long-term success and long-term enjoyment of a game, right? It's a game of basketball. This been kind of a rant, I'll be honest with you guys, but when I was, again, it's just something that I see, and like, I don't like it. I want things to be a little bit different. So just getting my 2 cents out there, but again, I do kind of want to relate this back to players, because for me, I've played, like I said, with a bunch of different coaches, some really, really good coaches, and some coaches who aren't quite as good. Back when I was, I would have been in 9th grade, I, for the most part, I've had good coaches, right? Middle school, great coaches. And then for, sophomore year through senior year, had good coaches as well. But my freshman year of high school was a completely different story. I had a coach who, the year started off a little bit weird because I was hurt the first half of the season, and so I wasn't playing. And then when I got back, the coach just, like, I just didn't see eye to eye with the coach at all. And there was a few different things. I thought that, first of all, looking at it now, like, was my coach a good coach? No, he wasn't a good coach. He wasn't a basketball guy. Like, he didn't know how to coach basketball. He didn't really know anything about basketball. He wasn't a very knowledgeable guy. He was much more like a lacrosse. Like, he was kind of just there. Like, he kind of was just like, essentially imagine if you have a coach who, played basketball back in like the 80s and then just decided that that's how basketball is. Like, how I play back in the 80s, that's how we're going to play now. That's how we're going to practice, how we're going to play. That was my coach, basically. So yeah, not where I'm at now, like, no, not a good coach, but there certainly was things on my end that I didn't do to help the situation, right? That I may have put myself in more of a hole at that time, despite not seeing eye to eye with that coach. So the first thing really comes down to, with you, you want to first evaluate yourself. Say, hey, you know what? Like, is there something that I'm doing that is causing this reaction from my coach? Whether it be I'm not playing as much as I want to, whether it be my coach, doesn't seem to, want to, my coach doesn't seem to agree with me on anything. My coach doesn't seem to like me very much, whatever it might be. You have to first look at yourself and say, hey, is there something that I'm doing that maybe I should be doing better, or maybe I should be changing completely? And it kind of starts with the first thing is, what do I do to help the team win? I've talked about it a couple of times. I don't know if I've made a podcast episode on it, but I probably will at some point if I haven't already. But the most important skill you have is your ability to impact winning. Whatever you can do to help your team win, that's what's most important. So you might be the best shooter on the team, and that's how you impact the team. You might be the best defender. That's how you impact the team. You might be the best ball handler, so you're the point guard, and that's how you impact. Like, there's a lot of different things you might do. You might not be that good at anything, but maybe you bring a lot of energy in practice, and you push the guys ahead of you to do better, and that's how you impact the team and impact winning. Okay? You have to understand that coaches are trying to win. They're going to put teams on the floor that are going to be the most competitive. Okay, so it's not always about, hey, coach, I worked on this all off season, so why can't I go out and do this? Well, if you doing that doesn't help a team win, then it's just not going to happen. Like, your coach isn't going to do it. If your coach thinks that will help the team win, then he's going to let you do it. If your coach thinks that you shooting 10 threes a game is going to help the team, have the highest chance to win, then he's going to tell you, hey, go shoot 10 threes a game. Okay? Or he might not tell you that, but he might not tell you to shoot. Like, he might let you shoot whenever you want to shoot if he thinks that you shooting the ball is going to be the best chance for them to win. Okay? And on top of that, right, I'll have players who will be, frustrated because they have teammates who get away with being able to do certain things. Like, maybe they turn the ball over, coach doesn't take them out. They make a mistake, coach doesn't take them out. They miss a shot, coach doesn't take them out. But then the other kid, he turns the ball over or he misses a layup and he gets pulled right away. Well, that off the bat, right? That's not fair. Like, that's not very fair that one kid gets pulled and one doesn't. You have to understand, guys, that it's not like it's always fair. It's always fair. Usually, again, there's a caveat here, guys. There are I'm giving you guys general points right here because there's always going to be coaches out there who just flat out aren't good, and then maybe we're talking a different story. But for the most part, guys, when we're talking like school basketball, like high school basketball, for the most part, your coaches are going to be decently qualified. Like, they'll for the most part know what they're doing. So when I talk about that, like, you have a player who, maybe on their high school team, they turn the ball over, they miss a shot, they do something wrong, and they don't get pulled for it. They get to keep playing. And the other kid who does the same thing, he does get pulled for it. Well, here's the thing. It's not always going to be equal, right? You're not always going to get treated equally, meaning you guys get the same amount of time, okay? You guys both get to take the same amount of shots, and you guys can both make the same amount of mistakes. This is not true because that kid who doesn't get pulled might also be the best defender on the team. And therefore, when he messes something up on offense, he's going to keep on playing because the coach is like, well, that's my best defender, so I kind of need him on the floor, okay? You might have a kid who might, miss a layup, but also he's the best communicator on the floor, right? He's always in the right spot. He's always doing things correctly. And because of that, the coach is going to play him more. So that's the first thing to understand, that it's always fair. It's fair that the player who's better or contributes something somewhere else gets more leniency with mistakes, gets to miss more shots, gets to take more shots, okay, they're going to get that benefit of the doubt because of what they bring to the team, as opposed to the other player who doesn't bring those things. At that point, how are you impacting winning? If you go in there and you're not a great defender, you're not a great passer, you're not a great communicator, you're not really great at anything, but you go out there and you miss a couple shots and, you turn the ball over, well, how are you impacting winning? That becomes a question. So when that coach looks down the bench and, he might see another guy down there who maybe can't shoot as well as you can, or maybe he can't pass as well, but maybe he's a really good rebounder, or maybe he's just big and he's going to go and he's going to play inside defense and get rebounds, whatever. So coach is going to put that player in because that guy is going to contribute to winning. He's going to go get rebounds, okay? And maybe you get pulled because of that. Maybe you get pulled because what are you really doing that's helping the team win? At some point, that's what you have to understand. Like basketball, it's always fair. It's a fair game, but it's not. That doesn't mean you get treated equally amongst all of your teammates. Okay, the better players play. The better players get opportunities, and the better players get more leniency with their coaches. That's ultimately how it will always work. It will always work for any team that you will ever play on. And so that's something that you have to understand. How do I impact winning? What do I bring to the team? What do I bring every game that my coach looks at me and says, I need that guy on the floor because he does this for me? If you can't answer that question, then being upset with your coach about playing time, well, you really got to look in the mirror first and say, well, what do I need to work on so that I can be a player that my coach looks at and says, hey, I need him on there. That might be as simple as you're always in the right spot, right? You're always in help when you need to be, right? You're always, boxing out. You're always making cuts, when you're supposed to. You're always setting screens when you're supposed to be setting screens. Like you always do the right things. That's not a talent thing. That's not a, hey, you got to be able to shoot the ball like this and dribble like that. No, that's just a knowing how to play basketball thing. So that's something to understand, that if you want to, be able to play more, if your issue with your coach is that you don't play that much or you don't play as much as you think you should, well, it's probably because you don't impact winning quite as much as you think that you do. So that can be a conversation maybe you have with your coach. Say, hey, coach, what do I need to do to get more playing time? And here's the thing with that. Like a lot of times your coach is going to give you an answer, and sometimes some coaches are very, very honest about what they think. Some of them are. Some of them aren't, though. Like you might have coaches who might not be with you, but you have to be able to really be introspective and say, watch the film, watch and say, hey, what am I doing that is good? What am I doing that's not good? And what exactly can I do to improve? So that can come down to just normal situations. Sometimes players will be like, hey, I don't get to play in crunch time. Well, if you turn the ball over a lot, right? If you're always making bad decisions, then your coach isn't going to play you when it's crunch time. If, you had a game where you guys were winning by 5 and there was a minute left and you went down and shot a 3, within 5 seconds and you missed it, well, now your coach is not going to trust you to be on the court when you guys are in those situations where you're up by a little bit with a little bit of time left. Because obviously the smart thing to do is work the ball around, make the defense have to play you, hopefully make them foul you, or you get a wide open layup or something like that, and you want to run as much clock as possible. Okay, so coach is going to put players on the floor who can hit free throws, who are strong with the basketball, who make good decisions, and ultimately that's what it's going to be. Those players at that moment are going to impact winning the most. So the coach might take off his best rebounder because maybe they aren't great free throw shooters, or they're not great with the ball in their hands. Okay, that's just something to think about. You got to think about situations as well. So when we talk about playing time with coaches, it always is going to come down to what do you do to impact winning? How do you help the team win? And if you help the team win a lot, you're going to play a lot. And if you don't, then you won't play a lot. So ultimately, it's something to think about. The next thing, right, when we talk about not just the basketball skills part, obviously the way you impact winning, that's going to be the most important thing when it comes down to playing time or your coach liking you or whatever it might be. Like the way that you help the team win, if you help the team win, that trumps everything, right? That covers up a lot of faults. If you're a great shot maker and you're the best on the team at it, then it's really gonna make up for a lot of other things for you. But that's not always going to be the case. You're not always going to be the best player on the team. There are a lot of other things that you can do that can help you when it comes to your coaches, but also it can hurt you if you don't do these things. So number one thing is effort. So you might be one of the better players in the team, but if you don't give consistent effort, then you're not going to get consistent playing time. You're not going to get consistent, leniency from your coaches. And they're also not going to trust you as much because they don't know what version of you you're going to get. If you from game to game, some games you're there mentally, you're focused, you're locked in, and your effort is there, and sometimes it's not, then it's going to be a struggle for you to be able to build some sort of consistency with your coaches. And that's the question asked. Does my effort waver ever? Right? Am I ever just out there kind of going through the motions? Whether that be games, practices, that's something that coaches are always watching, and it makes a big impact. Something that should be pretty obvious, but do you show up to things? Like, do you show up to, first of all, practices? Do you show up to practice? Are you at practice on time? Do you show up to team meetings? Simple things like that I shouldn't really have to say, but I will say them anyway. So if you aren't doing those things, then expect your coaches to react to that. Do you take coaching well? Are you coachable? Can your coach criticize you and you be able to accept it and learn from it and get better from it, or are you always on the defensive? Are you always, well, coach this, well, coach that, well, I did this, I saw that, I did this and that and this and that, and then like you're not able to actually take what they say and learn from it and say, hey, you know what? Maybe there's some truth in what my coaches are telling me, and maybe they're not saying it because they don't like me. Maybe they're not saying it because they want to be upset or they want to blame me for this. Maybe they're just saying it so that I can be better and I can help impact winning more so that I can ultimately play more, right? Because you play basketball, you work in the off season so you can get to your team and hopefully play as much as possible. And then while you're on the court, hopefully do as well as you can. But ultimately, the first step is playing as much as possible. So if your coach is giving you feedback, chances are he's telling you something that's going to help you to impact winning more. And if you can do that thing, you will impact winning more, meaning you're going to play more, meaning you're going to have more opportunities to play well. So it's kind of a cycle. So you have to understand it all starts with you taking that criticism. Do you take it and then you learn from it and get better? Well, if you do that, then you're going to be on an upward trajectory. But we can think about it like this, right? You might have two players, very, very similar talent, ability, athleticism. Say they play on two different teams. Or let's even say they play on the same team, okay? And both of these players are, they both go and they both make a mistake and their coach says something to them and one of them says, okay, coach, and then learns from it and improves a little bit right there, accepts it, and then gets better from it, learns that, doesn't make that mistake again. The other player says, well, coach, but he did this and then that, but then I thought that and then this and then you just kind of had to give an answer to your coach and didn't really take what they had to say, but kind of had to defend yourself and do all this thing, and you didn't actually get better from that. Okay, so you, in hindsight, went down, right? That guy who took the criticism and learned from it, he went up, right? His ability to impact winning, it's up here now. Okay. The player who didn't do that, they're down here because not only did they not take what their coach said, now they're probably going to be in that situation again and probably make that same mistake again. So now their coach is going to see that happen again, and then they're going to be like, okay, we'll get him out, go put somebody else in. So you have less time in the game to play. Maybe they get to a situation like that again. Coach gives them, some criticism. The one player takes it, learns from it, gets better. Now he's up here, and his ability to impact winning. Although the player does the opposite, doesn't take it, has to give some sort of answer, he goes down. Now you have, let's say it's over a full season, you've got one player who's up here, one player who's down here, simply because one of them takes criticism well and learns from it, the other one doesn't. So the importance of being coachable, guys, cannot be overstated. It's one of the most important qualities for you to have as a player if you want to be successful as you can possibly be long term. Very, very, very important, because coaches trust guys who are coachable, who they know they can get on about certain things, because that guy's going to take it, respond, and ultimately help a team win more. They don't trust players who aren't like that, because they know that player ultimately does not really care about the team. They just don't really care. They care about themselves looking good, and they care about being right, and they care about all these sort of things. They don't care about the team winning. So That's another thing to ask yourself. Are you coachable? Do you take criticism well? Or do you always have something to say to your coach? Do you always, oh, coach is always getting on me about this and that, and then you aren't actually able to, you aren't able to actually step back and take a look and say, hey, you know what? He might be right on that. Or maybe he's saying that to me because he wants me to be better. And that's kind of the thing, guys, with coaches. Like, there's very few people that you'll come across who directly benefit from you being as good as you possibly can be. In life, there's just not that many people who do. But your coach, he directly is benefited by you being as good as you possibly can be. A lot of people in life, now this isn't really true, but a lot of people think that, somebody else being better or getting better, that's a threat to them. So people aren't really, like, a lot of people won't tell you the truth about things. They're not going to help you as much as they probably could, right? Because they might see that as threatening to them. A coach, he's going to help you as much as he can, because the better you are, the better he is. The better you are, the better his team is. The better you are, the more games that he wins. And that's what, that's what you play to win the game. So if you want to have winning teams, you're going to make sure your players are in the best position to be successful. And so once you recognize that basically everything your coach says is in the interest of winning and you being better so you can help the team win, then you start to get away from being offended and taking things personally and saying, hey, you know what? This is with my best interest in mind, because the better I am, the better my coach looks. And your coach knows that. Right? So be able to take coaching, be able to be coachable, and that's going to make a big impact for you as well. And then obviously, are you a guy who's around the offseason? Has your coach seen you put the reps in? Right? Or, because listen, if you get into a season and you weren't around the offseason, you start missing a bunch of shots, your coach might say, hey, you got to stop shooting that shot. Right? If you were in the whole offseason, your coach is seeing you shoot the ball, he knows you can make shots, you might get a little more leniency when you start, you get into a slump. Right? You might have your first five games, you might miss every shot you take, but your coach saw you in the summer putting those reps in, he's seen you make a lot of shots, so he knows, like, hey, he'll get it together, and you're going to have that benefit of the doubt. But if you don't do that, then it's tough for your coach to be able to say that to you. So that's something to think about. And then, obviously that's a lot of stuff in your end. There's a lot of stuff you can control to make your situation better. But at the end of the day, there could be times too where it's not really on you, where you've got to be able to say, hey, you know what, maybe this is my coach just isn't very good. And like I said before, like when I'm watching that AAU tournament, I see a lot of coaches who just flat out shouldn't be coaching. Like they shouldn't be. They aren't good coaches. And at that point, there's always, you have to make that decision, sort of like, do I want to play for this guy? Like, are there other opportunities for me? Especially when it comes to like AAU and travel ball. Like, there's so many teams out there. So if you have a coach who's bad, who's always, really negative, always berating players, always putting players down, not in the interest of making them better, but in the interest of like proving a point, then that's where you kind of have to make that decision. Like, okay, is there a better option for me? But ultimately, that needs to come after you first say, hey, I'm maximizing all the things that I control. And ultimately, that's the best way to kind of deal with coaches who are bad, or who you disagree with, or who you don't get along with. And again, if you want to make sure that you maximize the amount of playing time that you get, the amount of opportunities that you have, then make sure those controllables, your effort, your coachability, how you showing up to things, and you being able to impact winning, ultimately, those are going to be at the forefront of what you do, and everything else is going to kind of fall into place. So hopefully this helps you guys out. Like I said, guys, leave a review. Let me know what you think. If you guys are on YouTube right now, drop a comment for me. Give me your thoughts on this. Give me your experiences. If I missed something, let me know about it. And again, like I said, there's no, I'm giving you guys some generalities. Obviously, there's coaches out there. Like I said, there's coaches out there who are bad coaches, and there's not much you can do about those type of coaches other than go play for a new team. So listen, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, you got to stick it out. You got to go. No, if you have an opportunity to go play for a different team with a better coach, then go do it. I'm all for it. But also, you can't blame, like you have to know the difference between a coach who is trying to win and a bad coach, because they're not the same thing. But a lot of players are like, oh, he's a bad coach, he doesn't play me. Or he's a bad coach, he doesn't let me shoot. Well, why is that? Right? There's a difference right there. So again, hopefully this helps you guys out. And like I said, give me a follow on Instagram, send me a DM if you have any questions for me. Any sort of podcast suggestions, topics, all that, hit my DMs as well. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.